They brought me to a house that smelled like a wolf. Not the animal, but a man who'd spent too long pretending he was the law. The air hit me the moment the car door opened. Sterile. Metallic. Chlorine sharp enough to sting the back of my throat. Underneath it all, the faintest trace of pine and fear, the kind that lingers when people have learned not to breathe too loudly. "Welcome to the Center for Behavioral Correction," the guard said, voice robotic through the filter mask. His scent was dead air, the kind of nothingness that only exists when someone's tried too hard to erase themselves. I smiled. Charming. Inside, the hall gleamed like a hospital married a prison. White marble floors polished to blindness, chrome rails reflecting my face, 100 times over, every reflection more exhausted than the last. I wasn't supposed to bring anything personal, but I'd hidden a small vial in the lining of my collar. 1 drop of bergamot and amber, my own version of defiance. They thought scent could be sterilized, that emotions could be neutralized. Cute. He appeared at the end of the corridor, like the room had been waiting for him. Tall, straight-backed, gray suit, pressed with military precision. His presence made the air heavier, but not unpleasant. That scent. Vetiver, sandalwood, and something warm that didn't belong in a place like this. Martin Klein. Director, the wolf behind the glass. "Lucas Ashford," he said, voice low even. "You've caused quite a bit of trouble for your last employer." I tilted my head. "Only if you define trouble as thinking for myself." His expression didn't change, but the muscle in his jaw did. It was subtle, the kind of flicker that tells you a man's fighting the urge to feel. The guards hovered behind me. I could smell their unease, metallic sweat hiding under synthetic deodorant. I touched the edge of my collar, a small movement, invisible to everyone but me, and released a whisper of bergamot into the air. 1 guard blinked. The other hesitated, steps slightly off rhythm. Martin's nostrils flared almost imperceptibly. He felt it, the tiny misalignment in the world he'd built. "What did you just do?" he asked. "Nothing," I said, all innocence. "Maybe your filters need recalibration." He frowned but didn't pursue it. The man was control incarnate, but control never lasts. He led me through the corridors, explaining rules, curfews, therapy sessions, restricted access, scent suppression zones. His tone was calm, professional, but I could hear what he wasn't saying. Obey and survive. I stopped at a junction, breathing in deeply. "You've tried to make this place smell like nothing," I murmured, "but that's impossible. You can't erase fear. You just bleach it." Martin turned to face me. His eyes were gray, not cold, not warm, just watchful. "We aim for order, not erasure." I smiled, the kind that hides teeth. "Order smells a lot like decay if you leave it too long." He studied me for a moment longer than was comfortable, then gestured for the guards to continue. His scent shifted, faintly smoky now, irritated. I liked that. It meant he was human. My new room was small, window barred but spotless, sheets so white they squeaked when I touched them. I sat on the bed, exhaled, and let my nose adjust. Beneath the sterile layers, ozone, detergent, cold iron, there was something else. The scent of old wood, trapped sunlight, a faint trace of someone's hand oil on the doorknob. The house was pretending to be lifeless. But I could smell the heartbeat under the floorboards. I leaned back and closed my eyes. He thinks he can lock down the air itself, I thought, amused. Let's see how long he lasts before it starts breathing back. The ventilation hummed softly, a mechanical sigh. Somewhere down the hall someone screamed. Brief, muffled, the sound of obedience being practiced. I didn't flinch. Instead, I whispered to the air, "Remember me, house. I'll make you smell like rain before I'm done." And for just a second, impossible but real, the filters stuttered. The house exhaled. The next morning, I was escorted down a corridor that smelled like metal and obedience. The walls hummed faintly with the sound of circulating air, or suppression, depending on how poetic you wanted to be. Dr. Helena Voss was waiting in the observation chamber. Her perfume was non-existent, which was, ironically, a choice. When someone tries to smell like nothing, it means they want to be invisible and in control at the same time. "Mr. Ashford," she greeted me, slipping on gloves the color of old snow. "Please hold out your wrist." I obeyed, mostly because I wanted to see what kind of leash they preferred. She fastened a cold silver band around my arm. It clicked into place with a soft electrical pulse. The air around it smelled faintly of ozone and sterilized steel. A pretty lie of technology. "This is your neutralizer," she explained. "It regulates the release of pheromones and other volatile compounds you may emit. You are here to regain emotional balance, not to manipulate your environment." I smiled, tilting my head just enough to seem harmless. "Balance," I repeated. "That's when you mix lemon and poison in equal parts, right?" Her lips twitched, not in amusement. "You have a reputation for sarcasm, Mr. Ashford. I prefer to call it realism, with better phrasing." Behind the glass, I could see Martin Klein watching. His reflection was sharp against the observation window, all iron posture and glacial precision. He didn't speak, but his gaze lingered a fraction longer than it should have. I could feel it brushing against my skin like static. Helena cleared her throat. "The director has allowed you temporary freedom within the main floor. Do not mistake this for trust." "Oh, I never do." When they dismissed me, Martin stepped out of the observation room. Up close, he smelled of cedar and faint coffee, a man who never sleeps but refuses to admit it. Studied the bracelet around my wrist. "It will adapt to your chemistry within 12 hours. Try not to tamper with it." "I wouldn't dream of it," I said sweetly, already dreaming exactly that. His mouth tightened. "Good. You'll attend a baseline session tomorrow. Dr. Voss will administer your first regulation tests." Then he turned and left, his footsteps echoing like an orderly heartbeat. The guards flanked me again, their silence thick enough to choke on. Back in my cell, sorry room, I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the soft hiss of air through the vents. Every breath in this place was engineered. Filtered, controlled, but even control leaves fingerprints. I leaned closer to the vent and inhaled. Beneath the metallic tang of ozone, I caught something else, the scent of dust. Residual alcohol from cleaning solutions, faint traces of human skin oil. Someone had worked on this system recently, someone who wasn't careful enough. Interesting. I spent an hour pretending to read the center's handbook while quietly dismantling the airflow grid with the edge of a spoon. It wasn't elegant, but elegance was for people who could leave when they wanted. A spark of air brushed my face, warmer than it should have been. A separate current, another system feeding into this one. So the filters weren't perfect. They'd left me a breathing space, a loophole. I smiled to myself, closing the vent and leaning back on the bed. "They think they've isolated me from the world," I whispered, fingers tapping the cold bracelet. But really, they just locked the world in here with me. The neutralizer's tiny light blinked once, steady, unblinking, like an eye that thought it was watching. I let it, because I already knew how to make air misbehave. They said the roof was off limits, which only made me want to see it more. Mira was the kind of girl who treated rules like mild suggestions. 19, with bright eyes that never stayed still, and a thin white scar, curving along her throat, the kind left by a suppression collar. She grinned when she caught me staring. "Don't worry," she said, tugging at the faded choker she wore now. "It's just a souvenir. I keep it to remind them I'm not supposed to be this alive." The stairwell smelled of iron, paint, and secrets. When we reached the top, she shoved open the heavy door, and warm air spilled over me. Wet, green, intoxicating. The greenhouse. Glass panes arched above us, fogged from the inside. Rows of plants stretched in every direction. Ferns, lavender, rosemary. Tea trees, all breathing freely without filters or machines. The air vibrated with life. I inhaled once and nearly staggered. Easy, Mira laughed, catching my sleeve. First breath always hits like wine. Nobody up here pretends to be cured. I looked around, dizzy from the contrast. It wasn't just the smell. It was the sound of real air moving, of leaves brushing against each other, instead of vents hissing in rhythm. How is this place not locked down? I asked. It is, she said, plucking a leaf of mint and rolling it between her fingers. But the guards hate humidity, and Director Klein likes pretending it doesn't exist. Says it's therapeutic for observation subjects. I snorted. He would say that. She crouched to water a tray of lavender sprouts. The soft floral scent mixed with the sharp bite of tea tree oil, cleansing, free. It felt like standing in sunlight after years underground. Mira glanced up at me. You're the perfumer, right? The one who made the executives tell the truth just by walking into the room? Allegedly, she smirked. They teach us here to be obedient, polite, predictable, like pets. I knelt beside her, brushing my fingers over the damp soil. I'm not a therapist, Mira. I just make sure the pets bite back, preferably with a hint of lavender. She laughed, a bright, defiant sound that made something in me unclench. Footsteps sounded behind us, heavy, deliberate. Jonas, the beta guard who always seemed half asleep until you realized he was watching everything. He stepped inside, scanning the plants. Then me. He didn't say a word, but his scent told me enough. Guilt and rainwater. The kind of man who follows orders but hates himself for it. He adjusted his earpiece. You have 5 minutes. Cameras loop every half hour. Don't make me regret it. Then he left, closing the door softly. Mira waited until his footsteps faded. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You can smell it, can't you? The fear in the air here. Everywhere, I said. She reached for my hand, her fingers cool and trembling. Then help me pull it out. Help me make this place breathe again. The scent of lavender sharpened as if it understood the plan before I did. I smiled, feeling the weight of the neutralizer bracelet against my wrist. Careful what you ask for, Mira. Once the air starts changing. It never stops, she finished, grinning. The greenhouse exhaled. And for the first time since I arrived, so did I. The lab smelled wrong. Not chemically. That was expected. It was wrong because it was too clean. The air held no trace of life, just sterile sharpness and faint notes of alcohol, as if someone had boiled humanity out of it and sealed the pot. Dr. Helena Voss stood at the control table, her hair twisted into a knot, so tight it could have powered the entire facility if connected to the grid. We'll begin with a controlled exposure, she said. You'll prepare a calming blend for the alpha subjects. Calming, I echoed. Define it. Reduced aggression. Stabilized mood. Lowered pheromone spikes. So, lobotomy in a bottle. Her eyes narrowed. Precision, Mr. Ashford. Behind the glass wall, 3 alphas waited in their testing pods, sensors attached to their necks. They looked calm enough already. Too calm, the kind that comes before a fight. Martin was there, of course, standing beside the glass like a monument to restraint. His suit jacket was off, sleeves rolled, tie still perfectly knotted. He didn't need words. His presence alone pressed the oxygen thinner. I pretended not to notice. Instead, I uncapped the vial and began mixing. A few drops of neroli for steadiness, clary sage for grounding, a whisper of iris for empathy. Then, because I couldn't resist, a trace of ambergris, the scent of unfiltered truth. Helena's pen hovered above her clipboard. What was that last component? I smiled. Character? She frowned but didn't stop me. The vapors curled into the chamber like smoke. Within seconds, the alpha's postures loosened, eyes unfocused. At first, it seemed perfect. Then one of them started talking, My supervisor's sleeping with two of my subordinates, he blurted, voice shaking. I've been covering for him. Another followed. I hate this program. I dream about biting through the straps. Helena's head jerked up. What's happening? And then the third subject started laughing. Not a soft laugh, the kind that sounded like release after years of silence. Martin took a step forward. End the test. Helena fumbled for the switch, but before she could reach it, one of the alphas swayed and collapsed. The sensors wailed. End it. Martin barked. The airlock hissed open. I didn't move. I was watching him. He strode past me, sharp and sure, and grabbed the flask off the counter. The moment he unsealed it, the aroma hit. Warm iris, ambergris, sage. His breath caught. His pupils widened, just barely. He inhaled again, controlled, deliberate, but his heartbeat betrayed him, a steady rhythm cracking under something it didn't have a word for. What did you add? His voice was low, almost human. I leaned against the counter, lips curving. Truth. For a moment, we just stared at each other through the haze. Behind us, Helena was shouting orders, staff scrambling, alarms flickering red, but it all felt distant. Martin's jaw clenched. He set the flask down carefully, as though afraid to break it, or maybe himself. You compromised the formula. I improved it, I said. Honesty is the most efficient sedative there is. He didn't reply. Instead, he removed his gloves, one finger at a time, and reached for the flask again, bare skin against cold glass. A quiet rebellion in the land of regulation. It was the first time I saw him touch anything without armor. The scent of sandalwood rose from his skin, rich and steady, a grounding note, warm against the chill of the lab. For a second, I forgot where I was. He looked at me, gray eyes storm dark. You're playing with fire. Good, I whispered. Maybe it'll finally start to smell alive in here. The alarms silenced. The air stilled, but the scent of him, sandalwood and steel barely holding, lingered long after he left, and I couldn't tell whether that was victory or warning. The corridors of the residential wing always smelled the same: detergent, recycled, air, and that faint trace of despair you can't scrub off even with industrial bleach. To stay sane, I started keeping a journal. Not of thoughts, those were dangerous, but of scents. My olfactory portraits, as I called them. It was safer to describe people by how they smelled than what I thought of them. Dr. Voss, antiseptic and ambition. Mints melted in acid. Jonas, rainwater, guilt, and starch. Mira, smoke from a candle that refused to die. Director Martin Klein, vetiver, black coffee, and doubt. I was writing that last line when the door slid open without a knock. Mr. Ashford, Martin's voice. Calm, precise, the sound of someone who never raises it because everyone already listens. I looked up from the page, pen still in hand. He was standing there in his usual immaculate order, gray vest, sleeves rolled, restraint in human form. I could smell the coffee before I saw the mug. He crossed the room, took the journal from my desk, and read the open page. His brow twitched once. Today he smelled like doubt and coffee. He read aloud. Do you consider that professional documentation? I tilted my head, feigning innocence. I'm an aromatherapist, not a censor. He exhaled slowly, the closest he ever came to a sigh. This could be interpreted as mockery, only by people who think honesty is offensive. For a heartbeat, the room went quiet, except for the hum of the air vent. Then something unexpected, a flicker of amusement in his eyes, gone almost before it appeared. He set the journal down but didn't return it. Dr. Voss reports that your behavior remains unpredictable. Try not to make her case stronger. Wouldn't dream of it, I said, knowing full well that I would. When he left, the smell of sandalwood lingered. Faint, grounding, warm. His internal temperature, if such a thing existed, was probably higher than mine. I leaned back, eyes on the ceiling, the taste of rebellion blooming on my tongue. That evening, Mira slipped into my room, her hair damp from the showers. She smelled of soap and panic. "They're coming," she whispered. "The council. Voss is setting up the scans. She says they're going to filter out the unstable ones." "Meaning anyone who remembers how to think," I said. She nodded. "They're starting tomorrow." I looked at the vent above my bed. The airflow hummed gently, unaware of the storm coming. "Then we'll need a distraction. Lucas." "Don't worry." I smiled, picking up one of my smaller vials, swirling the amber liquid inside. "Every machine that breathes can be persuaded to cough." She frowned. "You're insane." "Possibly. But in my defense, insanity smells better than fear." Mira hesitated at the door, lowering her voice. "If they catch you—" "They won't," I interrupted. "I'll make sure the air keeps their eyes busy." Her expression softened. Pity, admiration, or both. Then she left, closing the door with a click. That night, I mixed in silence. Notes of patchouli, thyme, a touch of synthetic ozone, a scent invisible to sight but loud enough to confuse surveillance sensors, to make the air lie. When I was done, I let one drop fall on the table. It shimmered briefly, then vanished. A quiet grin found its way to my lips. The cracks were forming, in the walls, in the system, in him. And the house was starting to smell like something new, like change. The medblock always smelled like surrender. Antiseptic, copper, and resignation, the chemical trinity of obedience. I was passing through on my way to the training zone when I heard it, the short, broken sound of someone choking back a scream. It came from behind the frosted glass of Lab 3. I shouldn't have looked. I did anyway. Inside, an Omega knelt on the floor, trembling, wrists bound with the silver restraints they used for containment. Her skin shone with sweat. The air around her stank of fear, sharp, animal, electric. 2 technicians held her down while Dr. Voss injected a syringe of pale blue liquid into her neck. "The neutralizer will stabilize her impulses," Helena said, her tone detached, scientific. "In a few hours, she'll be calm." "Calm?" I muttered. "You mean hollow?" Helena turned sharply. "Mr. Ashford, you are not cleared to be here." But I didn't move. The girl's breath hitched, shallow and fast, her pulse fluttering against the restraints. That scent, panic turned sour, crawled under my skin like static. "Stop," I said. "Her system's already rejecting it." "Out," Helena ordered. And maybe I would have listened if the girl hadn't started convulsing, her scent exploding in the air like ozone before a storm. I moved on instinct. The vial of silent night was already in my hand. One flick of the wrist, a mist of cool blue vapor blooming through the sterile air, lavender, rain-soaked stone, and the faintest whisper of smoke. The effect was immediate. Her body relaxed, her breathing slowed. The sharp tang of terror faded into something soft, like the first seconds after a thunderclap. Helena's voice cut through the silence like a scalpel. "What have you done?" "Stopped her from dying of your compassion," I said. The door hissed open behind me, Martin's voice, low and steady. "Enough." He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The room froze. Helena straightened, trying to recover her authority. "Director, this man just interfered with a controlled—" "I saw," he said. Our eyes met. His expression was unreadable, but his scent betrayed him. Sandalwood threaded with tension and smoke. Control shaken, not broken. "Mr. Ashford," he said quietly. "Return to your quarters." I held his gaze for a moment longer than I should have. "You're welcome," I murmured, then walked out. Hours later, he came to my room. He didn't knock this time either. The door slid open, bringing with it that familiar scent of cedar and restraint. "You disobeyed a direct order," he said. She was suffocating. she was being treated with poison. He stepped closer, tone even. You think I don't see the flaws here? You think I enjoy this? I think you mistake silence for stability. His jaw flexed. What would you have me do? Stop treating fear with more fear, I said softly. Try rain instead. He frowned, not understanding. I didn't explain. I just gestured to the flask on my desk. Silent night. For you, I said, in case you ever decide to breathe. He stared at it for a long time, then turned and left without a word. The door closed, sealing in the quiet. When I was sure he was gone, I smiled faintly to myself. The scent of sandalwood lingered in the air. His scent, warm, uneasy, like the moment right before a storm chooses where to break. The message came after lights out. A guard at my door, no words, just the cold flicker of a keycard across the scanner. Director Klein requests your presence. Midnight summonses never meant anything good, but curiosity has always been my favorite sin. The corridors were quiet, half-lit veins of steel and glass pulsing with low hums. Even the air felt subdued, like it was holding its breath. I walked barefoot, my bracelet glinting faintly with each motion. The scent of cleaning agents couldn't hide the trace of sandalwood that drifted down the hall. His scent. Martin's office looked different at night. No witnesses. No protocol. Just him, a dim lamp, and a stack of files he wasn't reading. He didn't turn when I entered. Mr. Ashford, he said. Voice smooth but tired. Do you know what time it is? I'd guess between too late and too early. He finally faced me. The loosened tie was a scandal all by itself. I did, slouching just enough to irritate him. So, what's the emergency? Someone overwatered the trauma plants? He ignored that. I reviewed your activity logs. You've been near restricted maintenance corridors. I smiled. You mean the vents? His eyes narrowed. Explain. I needed air. You have air. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Recycled, filtered, emotionless air. It smells like math. I wanted the real thing. You wanted to tamper with facility infrastructure, he corrected. I met his gaze. No, I wanted to breathe. The silence stretched between us. Taut. Humming. He looked at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle, and was both annoyed and impressed that it had edges he couldn't find. Finally, he said, You're not planning to escape. Escape? No. I smiled faintly. I'm not running, I'm just airing out the place. That earned the smallest huff of laughter, so quiet I might have imagined it. You're reckless, he murmured. Only when observed. He studied me, then turned toward the window. The glass reflected us both. Him a silhouette of order, me the blur of defiance standing too close to the light. Dr. Voss believes you're trying to undermine the facility, he said. Dr. Voss believes microwaves whisper government secrets, I countered. You, on the other hand, don't believe. You measure. He faced me again, something flickering behind the professionalism. You think flattery will save you? Depends who needs saving. The air between us thickened, not dangerous, but dense enough to notice. The sandalwood in his scent deepened, darkened with something unguarded. I wondered if he noticed how close I'd leaned, or that I'd stopped breathing entirely just to catch the heat of it. He looked away first. You're infuriating. That's a type of progress, I said. He opened a drawer, retrieved a small metallic card, and slid it across the desk. This grants limited access to the main ventilation system. You'll be accompanied by a technician. My brows lifted. Why the sudden generosity? I prefer to monitor your curiosity rather than chase it. Translation, I trust you just enough to blame you later. I took the card, fingers brushing his. The contact was brief, accidental almost, but his skin was warm, pulse steady, scent sharp and steady like freshly split cedar. Thank you, I said, quietly sincere. Don't make me regret it. Oh, director, I murmured, tucking the keycard into my pocket. You will. But not in the way you think. He didn't reply. He just stood there, watching as I left. His gaze heavy enough to follow me down the corridor. The lights dimmed behind me, one by one. My reflection caught in the glass panels, moving through the dark like a rumor. He didn't know it yet, but the revolution had already begun, and he'd just given me the key. If hell had an HVAC system, it would look exactly like this. The ventilation tunnels were narrow, hot, and smelled like dust, metal, and bad decisions. Every time I exhaled, my breath came back at me with twice the humidity. Mira crawled ahead, muttering curses that could probably void her therapy clearance, while Jonas followed behind, whispering, "We're going to get fired every 30 seconds like it was a prayer." "We're not employees," I reminded him over my shoulder. "We can't be fired." He sighed. "Then we'll be terminated. Optimism suits you, Jonas." Mira stopped and glared back at me through the dim light of her headlamp. Less flirting, more rewiring. "I wasn't flirting. You were thinking about it," she said. "Fair point." The tunnel split ahead, one path leading toward the West Wing filtration hub. That's where I needed to go. The heart of the system, the place that could carry a scent through every room in the building, if you tuned it just right. We reached the first filter panel. Jonas handed me the tools, hands shaking slightly. He was a beta, all nerves, no dominance, but loyal. The kind of man who didn't want to break rules, only survive them. 5 minutes, he said. Then the night patrol does a scan. Plenty, I replied, unscrewing the panel. The vent opened with a tired hiss. Inside, rows of filters hummed with sterilized monotony. Mira leaned close. "How do you know what you're doing?" "I don't," I said cheerfully, "but I smell when I'm right." She groaned. "That's not comforting." "It wasn't meant to be." I slipped one of my vials into the chamber, a custom blend designed to mask human pheromones while amplifying natural scents, damp earth, rain, faint citrus. The air system would interpret it as a harmless environmental correction, but it would also create blind spots in the sensors. "Almost done," I murmured. "Once this kicks in, they won't smell us coming, literally." Jonas peeked over my shoulder. "This feels illegal." I grinned. "That's the point." A soft click, and the system came alive, the air moving differently now, softer, freer. It brushed against my face like a whisper. I inhaled deeply and felt it. A sliver of something I hadn't tasted in weeks. Freedom. Then, faint but unmistakable, another scent slipped through the current, vetiver and heat. Martin. My pulse stumbled. He was nearby, somewhere above or behind the glass and vents, watching. Maybe testing, maybe letting me do exactly what I was doing. I didn't tell the others. "Let's go," I said, sealing the panel. If anyone asks, this was a very intense meditation session. Mira smirked. "You're out of your mind. Only on my better days." Jonas muttered something about divine punishment, but followed. As we crawled back through the tunnel, the air began to shift around us. Fresher, warmer, more alive. The house was breathing again. By the time we reached the exit, I could already sense the change. Subtle, invisible, unstoppable. The filters had a new rhythm now, tuned to my frequency. The quiet channel was open, and through it, my sense would travel anywhere I wanted. Freedom, it turned out, smelled like possibility. And just a hint of vetiver. There are scents you never forget, even when you spend your whole life trying to scrub them out. When the council arrived, the air changed before the doors even opened. Authority has its own smell, polished leather, stress hormones, ambition steeped in disinfectant. But beneath it all, under the sterile veneer of bureaucracy, I caught his scent. Artificial musk and expensive lies. Elias, the man who'd once whispered that I was brilliant, that my talent would change the industry, that he believed in me right before selling my research and handing me to the correction program as a volatile asset. He walked into the reception hall like a predator who thought he owned the forest. Same immaculate posture, same too-white smile. The only difference was the trace of chemical musk thick enough to make me nauseous. I could tell he'd layered it intentionally to hide the rot beneath. "Lucas," he said, his voice dripping with practiced warmth. "It's been too long." "Not long enough," I replied, smiling the way a snake does before shedding its skin. His eyes darted to my bracelet, then to the guards flanking the hallway. "Still under observation, I see. Still overcompensating with perfume, I see." He chuckled softly, as if we were sharing an inside joke instead of a crime. "You were always unpredictable. I did what was necessary." "Necessary for your career," I said, voice low. "Not for me." The words hung between us like static. He shifted, uncomfortable. The scent of guilt flickered for half a second, bitter almond and salt, before being smothered by that synthetic musk again. Behind me, the door slid open. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. The air itself adjusted. Vetiver. Cedar. Control. "Martin." He approached, his tone as even as ever. "Consultant Elias Grant," he greeted, formal, polite. "Welcome back to the center. I trust the journey was pleasant." "Very," Elias said, though his smile wavered. Their eyes met, wolf and vulture, sizing each other up. I stood between them, acutely aware of the tension that wasn't entirely professional. Martin's gaze flicked to me, then back to Elias. "You two are acquainted?" Elias grinned. "Intimately." Martin's expression didn't change, but his scent did. The sandalwood deepened, darker, heavier, threaded with heat and something like smoke. "Is that so?" he said quietly. Elias smirked. "Lucas has unique talents. I helped bring him to your attention, you might say." "Helped," I repeated. "That's one word for it." The conversation was polite enough on the surface, but the air had turned into a minefield. Elias's arrogance was thick with overconfidence, while Martin's restraint felt like a blade behind glass. And me, I was the glass, cracked and smiling. When the council meeting began, I stood by the wall, observing. They discussed behavioral outcomes and chemical compliance rates, using words that made people sound like math problems. Helena paraded data and reports, all scrubbed clean of humanity, but every sentence Elias spoke made my skin crawl. He talked about me as if I weren't there, the Ashford formula, the instability factor, the collateral risk. I realized suddenly that he had no idea what I'd already done to the air. The filters were tuned. The channels were open. The vents above the council chamber led straight to the central diffusion line. All I needed was a trigger. Martin's voice broke my focus. "Mr. Ashford," he said, meeting my gaze across the room. Calm, warning. He knew. Elias followed the glance, smirking. "Still under supervision, I see." I smiled sweetly. Not for long. He didn't understand what that meant. Not yet. But Martin did. His pupils dilated, ever so slightly, and he shook his head once, subtle, almost pleading. Too late. I slipped my hand into my pocket, fingers brushing the small vial labeled Rapture. Not the religious kind, the chemical kind, my own invention, a concentrated mix designed to dismantle restraint. One drop in the vent would be enough. I opened it. A low hiss, barely audible, escaped into the system. The scent began to move. Rain, amber, heat, lightning, a perfect storm wearing perfume. Elias kept talking, oblivious. The council droned on. The room's equilibrium started to wobble. A heartbeat too fast, a breath too deep. Martin's gaze locked on mine. There was no command in it, no anger, just the quiet acknowledgement of what was coming. And what couldn't be stopped. I exhaled. The storm was already in motion. And the last thing the house smelled like before it broke was silence. The first drop is always a whisper. I tilt the vial into the open intake and watch the liquid vanish into the duct, swallowed by the lungs of the building. Rapture is only the match. The fuel is already everywhere, in the filters I tuned, in the quiet channels I opened, in the brittle order that's dying to crack. A low thrum rolls through the lab. The vents sigh. Then the air changes. Rain, not the polite, filtered kind the center pipes into their relaxation rooms, but the first. Storm after a drought, stone cooling underwater, petrichor rising like a prayer. It unspools through the corridors, coils down the stairwells, slides under doors. Panic noses the scent and pauses, confused, as if someone just opened a window in the spine of the world. Then honey, warmth melting along the edges of fear, not cloying, a promise. People who were bracing to run, instead, exhale. Voices lift, not loud, just honest. The frequency of footsteps shifts. I hear laughter where a minute ago there were orders. And then, inevitably, wonderfully, sandalwood. His scent, traveling on the storm. Alarms begin their ritual wail. Red lights stutter against the glass, and the lab's emergency. Shutters try to lower but stick halfway, like even the machines want to watch. I feel the building tilt around me. Not physically, but morally, like it's finally stretching after sleeping too long in a bad position. I'm still standing at the console when the door slams open. Lucas. Martin fills the threshold, hair damp, tie crooked, sleeves shoved past his elbows like he fought the hallway and won. He smells like he always does, vetiver, cedar, but there's rain on him now. And something warmer underneath that has nothing to do with the storm. You're insane, he says, voice steady while everything else isn't. I smile, a little giddy. Finally, a correct diagnosis. Shut it down. Can't. I tap the gauge. It's bigger than a switch now. The house remembered how to breathe. He crosses the room, stepping over a fallen tray, past shards of glass glittering like teeth. Up close, he's heat and gravity. His presence pulls order out of chaos, the way thunder organizes a sky. Do you have any idea what you've done? He asks. Lower. Yes, I say, equally soft. I told the truth in a language they couldn't censor. The vents exhale again, a rush that billows the blinds and carries the scent deeper. Rain-soaked stone, a thread of tea, a flicker of amber. Somewhere down the hall, a fight turns into sobbing, then into quiet. I don't know whether that quiet is reconciliation or exhaustion. Both smell similar at the end. He's close enough now that I can see the tiny scar near his jawline. A healed cut that looks like it learned not to bleed by sheer stubbornness. Elias is in the council chamber, he says. Voss is trying to lock it down. They'll blame this on you. On me. Good, I tell him. They should pick on someone their own size. Something breaks in his expression. Not control, not exactly, but the useful illusion of it. He reaches out, fingers grazing my wrist above the neutralizer. The contact is accidental for exactly 1 second, then decidedly not accidental at all. Heat jumps from his skin to mine, and sandalwood blooms in the space between us like a door opening. You're trembling, he murmurs. I'm calibrating, I say, but my voice doesn't hold its usual edge. Siren light paints his face in pulses. Red, shadow, red. The shutters groan, the glass shivers, the air hums with more heartbeats than the room should hold. For a moment, we are the eye of the storm. Tell me this is your choice, he says. It is. The words taste like rain. He leans in, and we find the precise temperature where tension turns into touch. Nothing dramatic, a palm at my jaw, my fingers at his collar, the space between us erasing so slowly, it feels like respect. He breathes me in, like an antidote he can't admit he needed. I breathe him back, and the sandalwood steadies the floor. Somewhere, glass cracks. Somewhere else, someone laughs through tears. The world can attend to itself for a minute. I should arrest you, he says against my mouth. You missed your chance, I reply. And then there's no space left for lines. It's not desperate. It's not frantic. It's a calibration, skin to skin, breath to breath, consent threaded through every shift of weight. His hand finds the back of my neck, careful, anchoring. Mine maps the seam of his vest, the warm slip of his shirt beneath. The place where a man pretending to be the law is only a man. When we finally part, the room feels brighter, though the lights haven't changed. He's breathing harder than I've ever heard him. I'm not sure if I'm standing or floating. Lucas, he says, warning and plea and name all at once. I know, I whisper. We still have to survive the next hour. As if to punctuate the thought, the lab door rattles. Voices approach. Voss barking orders. The glass above the console spiderwebs, deciding whether to become snow. I pick up the last vial on the table, a small amber thing that looks harmless until you've lived through it. Martin's eyes flick to it, then to me. He doesn't ask me to stop. Ready? I say. He nods. With you? Apparently. I grin. Wild, relieved, terrified. Then breathe. I flick my wrist. The vial slips, hits the steel edge of the console, and explodes into 1,000 glittering pieces. A golden mist erupts, catching the siren light, rolling out in a warm liquid wave. Rain surges back through the vents. Honey lifts like a benediction. Sandalwood anchors everything to the bones. The aroma slams through the lab, out the door, down the corridors, into the council chamber, into the places even the filters forgot. People stop, mid-order, mid-lie, mid-fear. The house inhales. And then, finally, magnificently, the house breathes out. Smoke has a strange honesty. It doesn't pretend. It fills every lie, every corner, until there's nowhere left to hide. The main hall was chaos. Alarms howling, glass cracking under heat, sprinklers hissing against a fire that refused to be tamed. The council's banners burned first, all that fabric and ceremony curling into gray ribbons. The scent of ozone, melting plastic, and honey mixed into something almost holy. Helena Voss was screaming orders over the intercom. Contain the breach. Lock down all lower levels. Arrest Director Klein. That last part pulled my attention. Martin stood in the center of the hall, jacket off, shirt torn at the shoulder, fingers flying across a console. Every monitor around him flickered to life. Security footage, restricted archives, sealed correspondence. What are you doing? I rasped, coughing through the smoke. What you started. A few keystrokes later, the screens bloomed with evidence. Helena's medical trials, suppression protocols, confidential memos labeling omegas as acceptable casualties, and then, with one final tap, he sent it all to the public network. 1,000 secrets exhaled at once. Council guards froze. Stared. Others dropped their weapons. The truth had a scent, and it burned cleaner than fire. Director Klein! Helena's voice cracked through the speakers. You've doomed us all. No, he said quietly. I just stopped pretending we were saving anyone. Before I could answer, a tremor rolled through the floor. An explosion somewhere below. The lab, maybe, or the vents. Jonas appeared from the corridor, dragging Mira by the arm. Both were covered in soot, eyes wide, but alive. We've opened the lower tunnels, Mira shouted. Everyone's heading out through the supply route. Martin nodded. Get them out. As many as you can. I tried to stand, but my body didn't cooperate. My knees buckled, vision swaying. Too much exposure. Too many compounds inhaled. My own creations were drowning me from the inside. Martin caught me before I hit the floor. Hey, I managed. My voice slurred. Don't look so worried. I'm just high on honesty. He glared at me, but the glare was shaky. You shouldn't have stayed. Neither should you. He lifted me easily, arms steady despite the chaos. I could feel the thunder of his pulse through his chest. The scent of sandalwood wrapped around me like a tether to something real. The air behind us was thick with flame and truth. We made it halfway down the corridor before he spoke again, voice low against the roar of collapsing metal. "You set all this off for me?" I forced a smile. "For the air. You just happened to be breathing it." "Lucas, no one should have to live choking on lies," I whispered. "You wanted order, I wanted freedom. Maybe they're the same thing when the world's burning." He looked at me for a long second, eyes gray, full of everything he'd never said, then pressed his forehead briefly to mine, as if sealing a promise neither of us could afford to make. We stepped into the courtyard, just as the roof caved in behind us. Fire climbed the walls, like dawn claiming the night. Mira and Jonas herded the last of the Omegas into the open tunnels. Wind rushed through, carrying the scent of rain and smoke and something new, possibility. I leaned my head against Martin's shoulder, breathing in the mix of cedar and ashes. "Smells like freedom," I murmured. He tightened his hold. "Smells like you." The house groaned one final time and collapsed inward, a giant exhale. And for the first time, the air was honest. A month after the fire, the house smelled different. Not like smoke or fear or antiseptic, but like wet stone, tea leaves, and sun-warmed wood. The kind of scent that doesn't try to dominate. It just lingers, quietly reminding you that you survived. The world had started calling this place a rehabilitation facility again. But that wasn't true. The center was gone. What stood now was something softer, something stubborn. A refuge for the unstable, which really meant a home for anyone who refused to fit. Mira ran the greenhouse on the roof. I could always tell when she was nearby. Lavender and soil drifted through the halls like laughter. Jonas had taken over the ventilation system. The hum was quieter these days, more like a purr than a growl. He said it was efficient airflow. I said it was peace, learning how to breathe. As for me, I finally had my own workshop. The walls were still cracked, the ceiling still patched, but the air moved freely, carrying a mix of spices, oils, and memory. I was working on a new scent. After the storm. It wasn't a formula so much as a feeling. Green tea, rain, fresh bark, and that faint, metallic trace that lingers on your tongue when lightning kisses the ground too close. The goal wasn't perfection. It was honesty. When the door opened, I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "You used my soap again," Martin said, voice low but amused. "The one with vetiver." I smiled without looking up. "Borrowed, not used." "Semantics," he murmured, crossing the room. His reflection caught in one of the glass bottles. Gray shirt, rolled sleeves, hair a little too long. He looked less like the director now, and more like a man learning what to do with free time. He leaned on the table beside me, scanning the rows of vials. "Let me guess," he said. "You're rebuilding chaos in liquid form?" "Something like that," I said. "It's called After the Storm." He picked up the small bottle, held it to the light. "Tea and rain," he said, sniffing. "And cedar?" "Fresh bark," I corrected. Cedar was too proud. "This one's humbler." Martin nodded, the corner of his mouth twitching upward. "You sound like you're describing a person." I shrugged. "Maybe I am." We stood there a moment, the silence easy, the kind that doesn't need explanation. Through the open window, I could hear laughter from the garden, Mira shouting at Jonas for overwatering again. The air was full of color, sunlight bouncing off glass jars, everything alive and terribly imperfect. Martin set the bottle down carefully. "You know," he said, "for a house that nearly burned down, it smells good." "That's the rain talking," I replied. He looked at me then, really looked. That soft gray gaze that had once dissected, now simply saw. "No," he said. "That's you." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he reached for my wrist, tracing the faint mark where the neutralizer once sat. The skin there had healed smooth. Feels lighter, he murmured. It should, I said. The air's on us now. Outside, the sky cracked open, not in thunder but in sunlight. The light spilled through the windows, golden and lazy, carrying the scent of tea, bark, and possibility. Martin smiled. You've turned this place upside down. Maybe, I said, stepping closer, brushing my fingers over his hand. But now it finally smells right. He chuckled. You call this right? It's chaos. Maybe, I said again, and leaned into the warmth of his laugh. But it's our chaos. I glanced around the room, at the bottles, the open windows, the air shimmering with freedom. Now the house smells like us, I said quietly. And if that's a mess, he smiled, finishing the thought for me. Then let it be. And the house, mercifully alive, breathed in agreement.